closer, depending on which side you are. But I think we as election observers can see that there is some maturity in the conduct of campaigns.
Okay. And of course, we'll shortly be talking about the conversation that has been going on in the country on whether candidates or aspirants who have questionable character or have matters pending in court or various places should be cleared to run. There's something that came out from a group of NGOs or civil societies yesterday indicating that there are certain leaders they recommended to IEBC that should not be cleared. But also, if you look at the papers, Kalonzo is in crunch talks. Of course, he has been out of the country. And then on the Standard, they are talking about Kalonzo's options inside and outside Azimio are slim. Of course, this is a leader who, at a time like this last week, that is on Monday, he was yet to make a decision on whether he's running or he's backing Raila Odinga. His ultimatum had been that if Raila Odinga does not pick him as running mate, then he was not going to work with Raila, and eventually he even named a running mate in the name of Andrew Sunkuli. And Wakili, I read somewhere you tweeted talking about the state or rather whether Kalonzo Musyoka would be cleared to run on Wiper ticket, bearing in mind that the party is a partner or a member of the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya, a coalition political party. What is the legal position about this at such a time that, yes, political parties have formed that coalition political party, but they still have their own individual rights to field candidates in other areas? What happens to someone like Kalonzo Musyoka?
The legal position is that Wiper Democratic Party has now been subsumed into Azimio One Kenya Alliance, and insofar as the coalition party endorsed the Right Honorable Prime Minister Raila Odinga as the presidential candidate, the law does not permit Kalonzo to run as president. There will be a question of proof to IEBC. If IEBC, I'm told Kalonzo had submitted his papers before signing of the coalition agreement, but again, as we say in law, let the document speak. If there is a valid coalition document, and I believe there is because the registrar of political parties has spoken that issue, time without number, that Wiper is a primary party within the coalition party. And the coalition party has a presidential candidate. It cannot lie that a member of the coalition party can then field a candidate for president. Because the purpose of the coalition party is to field one presidential candidate. As to whether he can disengage or not, that would be, we would need to interrogate the circumstances. In my view, the short answer is no. Kalonzo is not going to be cleared to run for president. I have a different view.
Go ahead.
With tremendous respect to my colleague here, on the issue of whether Kalonzo can disengage from the coalition, my view is that, yes, there was this coalition. It is an agreement signed between parties before the registrar of political parties. However, the requirements, as you can notice, for vying as a presidential candidate are well spelled out in Article 137 of our Constitution. Now, if Kalonzo complies with the requirements of Article 137, despite the fact that there exists that agreement, he can still legally run as a Wiper or even as independent, as long as he meets the conditions set out in our Constitution. There are no other conditions. In other words, can the agreement to join the Azimio One Kenya be binding and technically stops Kalonzo from running? The answer is no. Because it's like this. It's just like an employer-employee situation, if I may use that. You cannot force someone to stay in that situation. I mean, there must be some exit arrangement within it. So technically, yes, there could have been a clause saying the coalition partner cannot run. But in law, as long as our Constitution, Article 137 is clear, and Honorable Kalonzo complies with it, and has submitted his papers to IEBC, which technically is the one clearing the candidates to vie. It's not the registrar of political party. It's the IEBC. And as long as you meet the requirements of the Constitution, the Political Parties Act, you're good to go. So that debate will keep on coming. But you cannot force somebody into a marriage which they want to move away. So if they want to come back...
That's interesting.
Yeah, because now the paper is saying Kalonzo in crunch talks, and another paper saying Kalonzo is a little bit confused whether to be here or there.
Right.
That is his decision to make. Whether he wants to be back in the marriage, that's okay. If he wants to bolt out, as long as he's within. And that, I think they realize that well in advance, and I think that's how the people surrounding Honorable Kalonzo decided to quietly submit documents well in advance, because they knew timelines are there, they know the Constitution, and they tried to comply.
Because I'm looking at the article that you refer to, that is Article 137, that a person qualifies for nomination as a presidential candidate if the person is a citizen by birth. Kalonzo is qualified to stand for election as a member of parliament, I believe he is, is nominated by a political party or is an independent candidate, and is nominated by not fewer than 2,000 voters from each of the majority of the counties. And so, Wakili, then, if that is the case, and this is the Constitution, how do you then reconcile what the Political Parties Act says and what the agreement for these political parties in forming a coalition political party provide?
Well, in my view, we don't even need to reconcile or harmonize. We just need to read it in together with other laws, yeah? The Constitution provides the framework upon which the details are fleshed out in statutes, yeah? In my reading of electoral laws, that is the condition that a presidential candidate must meet among other conditions outlined in the statute. I think it would turn logic on its head that a substantive statute, like the Political Parties Act as amended, should provide for provisions on coalition on formation of coalitions and a coalition party, and that political parties should sign into that arrangement either as a coalition party or members of a coalition, and then not have that law bind the primary parties who have signed onto it. It would be very difficult to persuade a judge to ignore the Political Parties Amendment Act, the political parties as amended. But I think it's a matter that is open to interpretation and conversation. What is undeniable is this. Kalonzo's chances of running for president now hangs in the balance, partly because of his indecisiveness. Because you see, both arguments are cogent, yeah? You may want to rely on the Constitution to say, well, I mean, this is the superior law, let's stick to it. The alternate argument is quite cogent as well, yeah? Because it says the Constitution must be read together with all other electoral laws. And those laws must be given the meaning the lawmaker intended them to have. And the parties that signed into that agreement, surely it must have some legal consequences. And what Kalonzo is looking at now, there is a very high possibility, let me now just put it that way, yeah? There's a very high possibility that is not going to be cleared. But I think what we must do, and I agree with Commissioner, we must permit IEBC as the election manager to interpret the law as they know it. As you can see now, the two lawyers have different approaches to this, yeah?
Right.
What we must not do is to bastardize IEBC's decision-making process, the independence, including the interpretation of what Kalonzo's candidature now means. If someone is not satisfied with IEBC's interpretive approach regarding the candidature of His Excellency, the Vice President, former Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka, then the default position, Sam, would be that you move to court to have a final opinion, because that's where we all go for final interpretation. All of us are bound to interpret the Constitution one way or another.
Right.
Kalonzo, if he thinks, having signed the agreement, he's still persuaded that he needs to run, fine, he can try his luck. If IEBC is not persuaded, IEBC will not clear him. If IEBC is of the view, adopted by Commissioner, that, yeah, they can clear him, then it now turns on a public-spirited citizen or a member of the coalition party to urgently move to court to question the legality or even the constitutionality of Kalonzo's candidature. And I think the matter will be settled.
And he said on Monday, he said that he still has unfinished business with the Political Parties Act as amended. At this point in time, with just about 6 or so days to the start of clearance by IEBC, are there any useful or meaningful orders you can get that will suspend the implementation of the Political Parties Act as amended, especially on formation of a coalition political party?
I think you'd be surprised. Courts are working overtime. and I'm sure even this week there's a matter we're arguing today, you know, relating to the two-third gender principle, whether parties should comply or not. Definitely the judge knows that a judgment must be rendered in the course of the week because official campaigns begin, I think, on Sunday. And therefore, yes, these are questions and that is the problem. The only problem I see is this in our electoral process. And we have discussed this. And IEBC said, let us manage our politics and lawmaking process in advance to allow them to prepare. Don't push them to a position where you interfere with election planning and management. But our people, we don't listen. Our politics is politics of convenience. And now when there's a stalemate that requires judicial interpretation, judges also are cornered because somebody must move to court urgently to get a final determination either way. If IEBC decides not to clear Kalonzo, and that I would support that reading of the law, Kalonzo might move to court and the court must pronounce itself. If IEBC clears Kalonzo, somebody within the coalition party would move to court to seek interpretation.
Right.
I think we push things so late into the deadline that we inconvenience the election manager, we inconvenience judicial officers, and then we antagonize the entire electoral process. I think that is a lesson we have not learned since 2017.
And Commissioner, former Commissioner, because Azimio la Umoja, before Maendeleo Chap and Pamoja Africa Alliance decided to exit, they haven't yet done that formally. There were some 26 political parties, I think,
in Azimio.
Or 25 years in Azimio la Umoja, One Kenya coalition party. What if each of them decides to fill a presidential candidate? What would that be?
As I said, the conditions are set out in our constitution. And our constitution is the supreme law. Any other law inconsistent with the constitution is void and null to that extent. So that's why you see these other political parties which have exited, they are still part and parcel of Azimio in that agreement. But the parties have moved, the people have moved, because it is a situation where the law allows you to move despite that agreement. So the question is, how binding is the agreement?
So as you say that, because that's the coalition political party, but there's a coalition of parties, that is Kenya Kwanza. If the member parties, say ANC or Ford Kenya, whichever other party decides to fill the presidential candidate, can they do that within the law?
Well, as Wakila has pointed out, you know there are timelines to this election. So whether you can comply is whether you meet the requirements of the law within the timelines. Have you been able to submit your papers? For Kalonzo, Honorable Kalonzo, he knew quietly that this problem is there. And so they prepared well in advance and submitted their papers to IEBC. The issue you are now raising, which is theoretical, is if the others want to do, can they do? And if they want to do, are they still within the timelines?
No. Assuming they had presented their name as they waited for signing of the coalition, because usually that has happened. My
position is clear.
So what I'm asking is, if they had presented their names before 28th, or is it 16th of May, could they within the law still field a candidate, yet they have a coalition agreement?
I think, to me, I have been very clear. If you meet the requirements of Article 137, and within the timelines, you can still do that, despite signing any coalition agreement. But let me say something that Wakil raised, and I've said this before, that we need all of us, all players in the electoral process, to be aware of the election timelines, in the sense that even our own courts, and I've said this before, our own judges must be aware of the situation the country is in. We are preparing for elections. And if courts make orders which will make the work of IEBC difficult, then it will not be right to do that. Because we are saying, let us all be aware of the timeline so that we don't put pressure on the election preparation. I have a point in mind. When in 2013, or was it when we were doing that election, orders came from the court that we must include a particular candidate. And by that time, election materials, election papers, ballot papers had already been prepared. So it forced the IEBC to do another sticking. Actually, we had to do manual sticking of the person's photo in the, in the already printed papers. And we complained at that time that our courts need also to be aware of our election timeline.
Who was that candidate again?
I think was it Mutula Junior? I think somewhere. Yeah, when we overruled the sisters' entry into the yes. So we had to manually affix the Junior's name there. So I think,
and that became the senator.
Yes, and so as Steve has raised, I think we need to be all the electoral players, including the courts and all other political party players, must know that these timelines are there, and we must head to election in August, and so we must all accommodate each other, knowing that IEBC has very tight timelines, you know.
Okay. Or you wanted to say something?
I just say something that just a bit on to IEBC directly, yeah? Because it's a very dicey situation. If IEBC must err, then it must err on the side of caution. The presumption of legality is a time-honored presumption in the law that all statutes, the presumption of constitutionality, yeah? That all statutes are deemed constitutional until declared otherwise by a court of law. So I think instead of, Kalonzo did a two-track system. He has already submitted these papers, but he needs a court order more than the Azimio One Kenya Coalition Party to strike out the implication that once you are a member of a coalition party, you are precluded from running as president as unconstitutional. Before the courts declare that the amendment, the Political Parties Act, as unconstitutional, the presumption that is binding must be upheld. I think, having said that, let's watch what IEBC will say. Whichever way, as I think all of us agree on that, whichever way, if there is doubt, we will rush to court for judicial interpretation. But I also just want to urge the judiciary not to be cornered, yeah? Not to be cornered by actions of politicians who delay their decisions to the last minute, yeah? Because, you know, to talk about human industry, Sam, if I'm sitting as a judge, you have given a heavy petition like this one, where someone's political future is at stake, filed a petition, it has just been put before me, let's say on a Monday morning, and I must hear both sides on the merit and render judgment. I will definitely not render judgment within a week.
Right.
And by that time, the matter shall have been overtaken by event. There is, remember, Sam Mohochi and Helef had filed a petition to stop the conduct of the fresh election. Remember the August 26th, the October 26th rather election, that petition is still pending to date, pending determination, yeah? There was no time to determine it. It was never determined, but curiously, it has never been, how do you call it? It has never been thrown out.
Right.
So there are petitions people will lodge. I mean, they will queue there, because courts are also human, yeah? So these are welcome consequences of the indecisiveness and inaction by our political leaders, I think.
You've been very kind on what you're saying, on the words. I want us to take a short break here. We were still expecting Mule Musau, who is the National Coordinator of Election Observation Group. He was to join us on this conversation as soon as he's able to bring him on board. But we'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll be talking about that conversation about clearance. What is it about? What will IEBC be looking for as they process the names of aspirants, whether it's at the presidential election or the MCA and all those that are in between? Stay tuned.